Hi, welcome to another video from SQL Maestros, and today we are going to talk about query tuning, and specifically I will focus on two DMVs, query stats and procedure stats. Now it's a no-brainer that DMVs, and by DMV I mean dynamic management views and dynamic management functions, without these two sets of objects it's very difficult to really even think about query tuning or performance tuning inside SQL Server. So this particular video that I am recording now is of course not to really get into the DMVs per se, but this video is inspired by one recent interaction that I had with one of the DBAs when he was a bit confused between these two DMVs. So the query stats and procedure stats, as the name says, query stats DMV has lot of information about every single query that has run inside SQL Server. Of course, unless you have cleared the cache by DBCC free proc cache or you've restarted SQL Server, otherwise that information is going to live inside this DMV. And procedure stats, as the name says, has lot of information about stored procedures. Now, here is the key thing. When you have a procedure, a stored procedure, there are a lot of statements inside it, right? And they run as a batch, as a single stored procedure object. So how will SQL Server record that information? Let's say you have multiple select statements inside the stored procedure. So the stored procedure as an object itself has a start time and an end time and the total amount of CPU the stored procedure has taken. All that information will go into procedure stats. And every individual query that has run inside the stored procedure, that information will go into query stats. So this is the key thing that I want to explain. And then when you have a slow running stored procedure, the procedure itself is not really running slow. There are probably statements inside the stored procedures that are causing problem, and then you may want to figure out those individual statements. So you will have to go to query stats. So that's the kind of correlation between the two DMVs, the query stats and the procedure stats. I want to show that to you. And of course, only if your query or a workload or a stored procedure is running slow will you really have the business of trying to understand these dynamic management views. And again, query tuning is very, very vast. It's a very vast topic. There are a lot of DMVs to work with, a lot of information to collect. So of course, all that is not really covered in this video. In this video, I'm just showing you the difference between these two procedures and a few important things on how to extract the right statement from inside the stored procedure. So without any further delay, let's get to the demo and understand this with code. So first things first, I will turn on statistics time and IO on. Done. And we are going to use AdventureWorks 2014 for the demo. Execute. And before I run free proc cache, let me show you what is the kind of output you get from query stats and procedure stats. So if I do a simple select star from query stats, you are going to see a lot of data, the SQL handle, which is for each query, and then the plan handle. And as we move forward, you have the creation time. All that is okay. Let's look at some important columns here. You can see the execution count, how many times each of these statements have run, and yes, of course, the total worker time. This is the amount of time the workload, the query has spent on CPU. So of course, this seems to be kind of high because the number of executions are more. So if you divide total worker time by the total execution count, you can get the average worker time, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of information about reads and writes, etc. Well, understanding all that is quite a bit of work and is probably requires a full day training. But yes, let's understand that each query here, the SQL handle that you're seeing, has something called a statement start offset and statement end offset. And this is what I want to explain. Now, let's go back to the code and see what does procedure stats give us. So if I execute this one, you will see that there are just two entries here. And again, you have the SQL handle and the plan handle, etc. for the procedure itself, and relatively very less columns. So you of course have the execution count and the total worker time. But yeah, less information about the procedure itself. Now, what we are going to do is, let me free the proc cache. And when you free proc cache, there is a small myth here. People think that when you free proc cache, you are actually freeing the procedure cache. Yes, that's correct. You are removing all the cached plans from the system. That's not a good thing to do, but you've done that. And what also happens is all the records, the information that was stored in this DMV, the query stats and the procedure stats, they also go away. So when I execute this, and now if you look at query stats, you will see absolutely nothing in the DMV. And likewise for the procedure stats, if I execute, you're just going to see that one entry, which is probably something run by the system itself. So why is this important for you to know that every record in the query stats is actually a representation of a cached plan in the plan cache. So if you kick out the plan from the plan cache, its corresponding entry in the query stats or the procedure stats will also go away. So please keep that in mind. So now that I have freed the proc cache, I am going to create a stored procedure called sales details. And look at this simple stored procedure. It's just running two select statements, the sales order header and getting the data from sales order detail. As simple as that. Let's go ahead and create the stored procedure. There's already an object name. Fair enough. I already have the object, which is good. So it does exist, or demos should be perfect. So let's simply alter this and you're done. So this is the stored procedure now, and let's free the proc cache again, execute, and now let's execute the stored procedure. So this is a manual user stored procedure that I am executing. And now after executing the stored procedure, and it's done in a few seconds, and you get the output from both the select statements. Let's go back to the editor, and now when I look into the query stats here, you have a couple of entries, and of course I want to figure out my select statement from the stored procedure, and then you have the procedure stats also, and one of the entries here is our stored procedure. Now, where do you get all this information from? So first, I want to show you the query stats here, and I am going to cross apply with a DMF called DM exec SQL text, and I'm going to pass on the handle to this DMF. So remember, this is a dynamic management function which takes one input, which is the handle. So I am using this cross apply function to apply every handle to this DMF, and when I execute this, I am going to get my statement. So now what you should be seeing here is, this is interesting. So look at this. Well, this is being run for query stats. Okay, so I am going to do this again for procedure stats. But now if you look at this one here, for our two statements, you can see, you can actually see the complete the proc code there. So you can see create proc something, and then select from sales order header, and then select from sales order detail, and you see two entries. Actually, in query stats, the first one is for sales order header and the second one is for sales order detail. So how do you know that? Well, as I said, this is for these two individual queries that were part of the stored procedure that we created. So you got to look at the statement start offset. So statement start offset here is the 60th, the offset here is of course in bytes. So you have like 2 bytes per character, and so you are starting from the 60th position going all the way to 130th position, and then you again, if you can see, you're ending at 130, and then the next select statement starts at the position of 136 ending at 206. So if we apply these offsets correctly in this DMV, we are going to get the exact statement, and this is exactly this particular query that we can run on query stats. And then you can see I'm doing I'm trying to get the statement start offset by 2 because it's 2 bytes per character, and I do the same for start offset as well as for the end offset. And then of course there is some check on -1. Well, -1 here means sometimes statement end offset can also have a value -1, which denotes the end of batch. So we got to give that filter. Now if I execute this, we'll get a more meaningful data, and now you can clearly see the statement text, which is I've got this extra text now: select star from sales order header and select star from sales order detail. So I'm extracting the correct texts out of my stored procedure. Well, now coming back to looking at this information from stored procedure stats. So if you join stored procedure stats with SQL text and you do a cross apply, what kind of information you get? We're getting the complete stored procedure text here. So this is the full code of the stored procedure, and look at this DMV output. The procedure stats DMV does not have anything to do with start offset or end offset, etc., because that is only applicable to these queries, the individual statements inside the stored proc. So I hope this thing is a little clear on start offset and end offset. So this is how you need to correlate. So when you are troubleshooting queries or query performance, if it's an ad hoc query, you really don't need to bother with procedure stats. But if it is and so you need to only focus on query stat. But if it is a stored procedure with multiple statements like running as a batch, then you need to focus on procedure stats as well as query stats. Now let's look at a few more things. I ran the stored procedure. Let me just run the statement alone. So if I just select this one, and you see I'm just starting from S and ending at header. Look at the cursor positions. And if I execute this, now this is an ad hoc statement. I've just executed it in isolation. And now if I look into the start and offset and all of that stuff and execute this on query stats, now you are definitely going to get these two from the previous execution of the stored procedure. And then somewhere you are also going to see select star from sales order header, this record again, the 11th one, as an individual query that I ran. And look at its look at the start offset is 0, because that was the starting position ending at 70. So this is what I mean by the individual statement, and this is from the stored procedure. Now let's look at some of the metrics, and just for the purpose of demo, let me show you the metrics related to the execution of the stored procedure and the individual queries. And because I have turned on statistics, time and IO on, let's go and look into the procedure stats first. So when I look into the procedure stats, you can see the total execution, so total worker time for my the first one here is 551261. So remember, this is in microseconds, 551261, and let's, so 55126. Let me just note it down somewhere. So we have this is for the stored procedure, so I will take this as 551261, and which means in milliseconds, what do we really get? About 551. That is the accuracy up to milliseconds, so that's 551. And when you look at the individual performance of the queries, so if I execute sales order header, let's go and look into the messages tab, you get 141 milliseconds there, and that's 141. So I can just easily capture this information from here, and just for the purpose of demo, I'll put it up here, and let me just quickly comment it. And sales order detail, if I execute this again, let's take how much time to take, 312, and let's capture this information and put it here, and then I will comment this as well. And let's do some mathematics. So we have these two numbers that we have, which is 141 and 312 from the individual execution. So if I select both of them, I'm getting 453. So up to the nearest second, 453. And then when you look at their actual total worker time in the query itself, so let's go and look at both these, one sales order header and sales order detail. So that is record number 11 and 16. So let's go and take the 11th record here. So my total worker time, if I scroll down a bit, is 235802. So let me just put it down, 235802. So that's 1235,802. And of course the next one is record number 16, and the total worker time for this one is 338424, and I'm going to record it 338424. So there it goes, 338424. So what is our number? Total is 574, right? There you go, 574. Now you can see so of course these were two separate executions, but you can see how it matches up. So you can see this is the total worker time for the stored procedure itself, which is 551, and the individual queries come to again close to 500 something milliseconds. So this is all like 0.5 milliseconds is the amount of time they are spending on CPU. So all these numbers do match up. And what is also evident from here is that we are calculating the amount of time the code is spending on CPU. We are not considering the elapsed time. So elapsed time is the amount of time it takes for the entire workload to be rendered in SQL Server Management Studio. So we are not computing that, or we are not taking that into consideration. We are only calculating the amount of time the workloads are spending on CPU. So a quick recap, too many things that I've shown here, so I'll just quickly summarize. I was trying to show you the query and procedure stats, and of course the difference between them. Procedure stats captures procedure level information, query stats captures individual query level information, and of course all the statements that go into procedure stats are captured here in query stats. And if you sum up all of them, in, let's say, trying to compute a metric, they should come closer to what you see in procedure stats overall. And by executing these statements individually and computing them, I was just trying to prove that point. Most importantly, statement start offset and end offset is important for you to find out every individual statement that is running from inside a stored procedure. Hope this demo was useful. With this, thank you very much. Hope this video was worth your time. See you soon in another video.